Welcome to 13 Cents More, the podcast. I am E. Probilski, an author, editor, and book publisher. I have done all these different things for many years, and I am here to share book publishing insights, personal anecdotes, information about my books, and so much more. Let's get into it. Hello friends, it's good to be back. I have been on various vacations for the last few weeks, and I am mostly home now, though I am going to an epic concert on Monday, the day that this is being released. So as you're listening to this, I am going to see Citizen Soldier in Boston, so huzzah. This week I wanted to talk a little bit about what editors actually do, because there are a lot of common misconceptions about what my job entails and doesn't entail, and I kind of wanted to breach that and discuss it a little bit more than I have in the past, and in somewhere less changeable than social media. So editing is a rich, nuanced, multifaceted thing, and I've talked about what different kinds of editing are in other places, but I wanted to get a little deeper into what the profession as a whole is rather than just kind of listing out the tasks we do. So this episode kind of runs the risk of being a little esoteric, but I'm hopeful it will help you understand some of the things that are near and dear to my heart, and I really felt that I wanted to discuss. I wanted to start with the fact that editing is more than just a job to me. I know that there are many editors who feel this way, so I'm not unique in this, but editing to me is a passion, it's a vocation, it's almost a calling, practically, and I view what I do with actual reverence, and I'm being kind of invited into a really sacred space in an author's head. Not so much in a religious sense, but like I'm allowed to interact with the most intimate parts of an author's heart and mind, and that is something that I find really honoring. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I do want to give a nod to that before we dig into this. If editing is more than fixing commas, then what is it, right? That's the question. The way I view it is that we're making an author's work the best version of itself. We are cheerleaders, mentors, and sometimes even friends for our clients. A lot of people think that editors are arm's length about our work and that we're all snooty and stuff, and some people are a little more arm's length, but a lot of us are, in fact, all of us, I'd say, we are rooting for our clients and want them to succeed. That's why we do what we do. We want them to succeed. And editing spaces where behind closed doors we talk about what we do, they're full of editors celebrating their clients' triumphs, and we are in their corner all the time, and we get really excited when our authors do something cool. I'll get into this a little bit more in depth later, but more than just correcting things, I am almost more of a writing instructor in a lot of ways. I specialize in working with new authors and mentoring them as they grow. That's one of the things that I'm really good at, and it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. I'm a teacher kind of by instinct. I've done martial arts instruction, I've taught music, and now I teach writing. And watching the lights come on and the eyes light up when they learn or discover something new and implement it correctly, it's one of the best experiences I can imagine. So whether I'm coaching a client or talking through email, I cannot express enough how happy I am when that light bulb moment happens. Like it's one of those things that will brighten up my entire day. Also, at the risk of sounding a little grandiose, I view my job as, in a way, being a caretaker of an author's soul to some extent. So every book we write is a window into our heart and mind. They're portals into the most intimate parts of our thoughts and ourselves. This is true of genre fiction just as much as it is of literary and nonfiction. There's no genre exempt from this, just as true of romance as it is of memoir. Our relationship to that creative spark and that author's voice, which is a reflection of their spirit, their lived experiences, their self, that's kind of entering into that space that I mentioned earlier where it's about being in a space that's sacred. Author voice is, to me, sacred. And I don't mean it in the religious way. I mean set apart for the purposes of being reverent or venerated. I don't mean it in the sense of religious necessarily, though to me I am a religious person, so I kind of have those overtones to it, but not everybody does. Now, don't get me wrong, not every single comma is holy. They absolutely aren't. In fact, commas are oftentimes unholy, thank you very much. Like, if I'm fixing punctuation errors or correcting straight and curly quotes, it's not sacred, really, but I'm still poking around in another person's soul in a way, and punctuation is more of a part of that than you think. It changes the meaning depending on how punctuation is handled, and it can change the way the author's voice is heard in the reader's mind. There are some decisions that are easy because they're categorically wrong, but a lot of the time it's more nuanced than you might expect, and it requires actual thought. When I was first learning to edit, I was extremely prescripted. I have either things that are correct via the style guide or wrong via the style guide, and it was binary. I kind of forced those decisions because that's what I was expected to do where I was working. I learned a lot working in those circumstances. I absolutely did, and I appreciate those experiences for what they were, but I grew out of that space as I became more aware and more entrenched in writing and editing communities. Because, yeah, there are things that are just plain right or wrong, like the various iterations of there, or what have you. There are a lot less clear-cut, correct or incorrect things in writing than most people think there are. So, what is correct, anyway? I've learned over the years that correct is a complicated thing. Do we mean correct against a specific style guide like the Chicago Manual of Style, or do we mean it in the sense of the reader understands what the author is intending? Is correct an external influence, or is it internally consistent? Are there things that are correct for one thing and not for others? Yeah, there are, in fact. Determining what is right for a manuscript or not right for a manuscript requires experience and study. Noticing that an author tends to use punctuation in a certain way might lead me to ensure that that stays consistent within the manuscript, even if it's a little bit weird outside of that, unless it's actually wrong. Does an author use specific language to describe something? Is the author using ESL syntax from another language that isn't wrong, but is definitely different? Do we want to keep that? Do we want to remove it? There are a lot of the questions exactly like that that show up when I'm working on a story. And that's the thing. Correct is not one specific thing the majority of the time. As a rule, the way that I view things, correct is more determined by the specific project I'm working on. What's right for that author? What's right for their voice? Sometimes it's strict CMOS guidelines for certain things. For others, it's much looser. It's all about knowing who the audience is for that work and what that author's goals are. As with so many things that exist in our world, there is no one true way that will get all of this to be entirely perfect in every circumstance. If there's no correct, then what the hell's the point of all of this, right? Why do this? Why edit at all if there's no such thing as correct? Well, editing is about more than just making your book quote-unquote correct. That's the thing that everybody makes the mistake of. Correct is a misnomer in a lot of ways, unless it's specific to a style guide, but what a good editor is doing is taking your book and making it the best possible version of your story, and they're doing it without stomping on you or stomping on your voice. It might sometimes feel like you're getting stomped on when you're getting edited, but there's a big difference between feeling like garbage because you came back and it's dripping with red ink and actually being stepped on. So I do want to make that note. Feeling and actually stepping on somebody are a little separate. So for me, my job is taking what an author brings me and polishing it and elevating it to the best we possibly can together without removing the things that make that author unique. I recently worked with an ESL client whose book was written in a way that was very clearly not English syntax. I understood it, and I had no trouble following the story. I actually enjoyed the difference, and it didn't damage my enjoyment of that story. As a result, I left that syntax just as it was, and focused on making sure everything was clear, readable, and enjoyable for audiences. So I'd remove repeated words, or if somebody used the same sentence structure too many times in a row, I'd fix that. But their voice was their voice, and trying to sanitize that out of the project would not have done them any favors at all. And then I had another client recently with whom I worked who struggles with description and evoking emotion in people. We did some exercises on how to describe a scene in a way that allows for the reader to really experience it with the character, but I didn't rewrite their book for them. I had them do it themselves, and that's because I wanted to make sure that their story stayed in their voice. I have been hired to ghostwrite before and I can do it, but it was way outside the scope of what this person wanted me to do, so obviously I wasn't going to do it. The reason I share these anecdotes is because the job is constantly changing. It's a dance between ensuring the reader can engage with and enjoy the story and remaining true to the author's voice while we do this. An author's voice is actually less fragile than most people think. It takes a lot to damage it, but it's still my job to be tender with that and show it reverence because, as I said earlier, it's kind of the heart of their storytelling and it's not to be screwed with. An author's voice is not to be messed with. As a rule, after working with me, my clients typically have a couple of things they like to say, and I hear this over and over again. The first thing is that I helped them understand what they needed better and gave them perspective on their work. Secondly, I gave them a lot to think about, particularly when we're doing developmental edits where I'm jabbing the world building with a stick, like, hey, there's a hole over here. Did you hear that? Then the last thing is usually that they walk away from working with me with a deeper understanding of their craft as a whole, and that is what I do as an editor. It's that. It's not just correcting commas and quotation marks, though that is part of my job. And there are also plenty of editors whose job that is entirely, and I respect those people. I could not do it. Those folks have a much deeper understanding of grammar and punctuation than I will ever possess, and I respect them so much. So please don't take that as me casting shade on any of my colleagues, because I'm really not. And not every editor has the same philosophy I do. There's nothing wrong with that fact, but to me, my job is about 60% writing instructor, 20% spelling and grammar, and about 20% cheerleader. I'll leave comments in the margins designed to explain why I do things and provide authors with as much insight into my reasoning as possible, because if they know why, they can grow and develop. I've seen authors go from really, really rough first drafts to phenomenal books over the course of a number of years and through various edits. And those are some of my career-making moments. Those are the things I'm most proud of, is those times when I send something back to an author and I'm like, hey, so here's the thing we gotta fix. And they fix it and come back to me and I'm just like, is this the same book? Holy crap, this is amazing. To me, I view my role as an editor as kind of being the old man on the mountain, right? I'm here to provide insight, wisdom, and guidance to people who come to me looking for it. I've been in the industry for a long time and I really pride myself on sharing what I've learned through the School of Hard Knocks. My goal is I don't want people to be floundering around in the deep end of the pool like I had to for a very long time. I would much rather give them a life raft while they learn to swim. So we're going to be working on these things together and move forward as partners in the writing process. I hope that this explains a little bit more about my philosophy of editing and why I do what I do. And if it resonates with you, please feel free to share this with other people. And if you have any questions, let me know. Either leave a comment below this or send me an email. My website is selfpub.me, selfpub.me. You can connect with me there if you want to talk about this or have any questions, or if you want to hire me. I am for hire. All right. Have a good week.